and welcome to the Service Operations Podcast. I am your host, 𝗪𝗱𝗏. Our guests are from different industries and functions. They will share their experience, strategies, and the changing landscape to help you take the service operations of your business to the next level. Hi Anand, it's been a while that we were trying to get this kind of time, and thank you for sparing your Sunday afternoon for this conversation.
My pleasure, Satinder.
And I'm looking forward to a very interesting and wonderful conversation with you, because that's the kind of career that you had. So, currently as a Chief Operating Officer of Apollo Clinics, Apollo Dental, Apollo Sugar, so you tell us a little about this, as well as, your transition from the telecom industry to banking to healthcare. Even though they are service-based, they're quite different.
Right. Yeah. So thank you, Satinder, for having me on your show. It's been it's nice to connect back with you after many years. My story is not really that exciting, but all of these transitions happened on their own, rather they weren't planned, right? So when I joined telecom, that was really exciting days, early days of telecom. Spent about 6 years doing sales and multiple types of sales in telecom. And then, moved to an organization where I quickly realized that I wouldn't be able to do much, right? And that's when, I started to see if I could, use my talents elsewhere. And that's how banking happened. And I must tell you that those 10 years with the bank were some of the best times that I've ever had in terms of learning, growth, achievement, and so many other emotions that are attached with the bank. And then, healthcare happened, right? And it's an interesting story, that I'd like to share with you.
Of course.
So, by God's grace, was doing reasonably well in the bank and really liked what I was doing. And then suddenly one of the days got in touch with a friend of mine. We started having a chat around startups and private equity and, people wanting to invest and grow fast. And that kind of piqued my interest. So through some way or the other, got connected with a few people in the private equity space. And they kind of came up with an option saying that here is a medical services organization, which is not a startup, but a 20-year-old organization. But we believe it's ready for disruption and growth and scale, right? And at that point in time, my understanding of healthcare was just hospitals. There was nothing else. Hospitals and maybe pharma. And then conversations happened, and internal conversations I had with myself saying that, the success of professionals, at least in my view, largely is also dependent on the organization and its culture and the brand, right? And maybe a reasonable part, or maybe even a smaller part, is because of the individual. And that got me thinking to check and see if I could go out there and work with not such a great brand name, which is fine, but try and see if I could, stand up to myself, right? And do this stuff myself, right? Without necessarily having the backing of an extremely strong and powerful brand like ICICI, for example, or AT&T for that matter. And so that internal, tussle, whether to do this, not to do this, get out of your comfort zone and try and do something which is uncomfortable. And it's not that, I was happy doing what I was, and as you know, banking is very interesting and it changes every year or 2 years, right, as we say. Right? So, then I finally decided, I said, okay, let me just take that plunge, right? And And that role was a role of a chief operating officer, which is essentially doing operations, customer service, sales, all of it. And you were, literally the second person in the company responsible for it, right? You
Yeah.
had a senior promoter, and then you were it, right? So I took the plunge, and I must say, it's been very challenging, but it's also been very fruitful.
And especially now, I think, I mean, you also went through the COVID period.
Yes,
That's
that
like,
was
that was completely a different thing, and healthcare particularly. That's been adventurous, the true adventure. So coming back, there is always this debate and discussion about being a generalist and a specialist. Now, the kind of industries that you move, so telecom and banking. Now we say, some things are common because they become common, and, the boundaries between industries have kind of blurred because of the digital environment and technology, internet, because that's common across all. So, what is your view on this whole thing about being a generalist and being a specialist? Because you've changed industries, like, with a good amount of experience in each.
so. I think it's I was reading a book called Range,
Ah,
and I read it recently, right? And it talked about individuals trying. It talked about Tiger Woods and it talked about Roger Federer and how both of them are on top of their game. Now,
yeah,
one started out with this whole clear view of that he wanted to become a golfer, right? And he started practicing. His parents, his ecosystem, everyone was geared up to support him in becoming a champ, and he himself, right, was clearly, clear in his mind. And then, and that's how he moved throughout his life, through his adolescence and teenage years, and he became the numero uno, right? And he continues to remain in the top three in
yeah,
golf,
yeah,
coming back from injury, coming back from personal issues, he's still there. And then they talks about the story of Roger Federer. Till his 30s, he tried his hand at every game, at everything, and he was reasonably good at everything. It's only post 30 that he kind of said, okay, I like tennis. I think I'll, kind of start doing stuff here. And that's when I realized that, some of the stuff that the book talks about, it says that as human beings, one should, or even as professionals, one should explore one's range of skills. One should build a reasonable range of skills,
yeah,
right? And in today's world, it is even more relevant. It may not have been 20 years back because, or even 30 years back when our parents used to work for an organization for their whole life, right? And if you talk about us, a large proportion of us in our age group are also maybe one or two or three company lifers in a sense, right? Or two company lifers. But I think then you have another set of people who say that, hey, I want to kind of see if I can do this in another industry. What more can I learn, right? And the biggest blind spot that some of us have who think they're specialists, and specialists is, or who even think they're generalists, is that we don't understand or we don't know what we don't know, right? So we have that blind spot. We say, okay, we're doing well in an industry, and we're there. So I think we're doing great, right? And it may be possible that you're doing great, but there is so much out there that you may or may not be exposed to unless you put yourself into that position. So for me, getting out from telecom to banking, right, they both are sales organizations, both the organizations that I worked for. And from there, understanding, I think both the organizations kind of helped me move from becoming a specialist, or rather becoming a good specialist, and then they gave me an opportunity to become a generalist as well, right, in at least in one part of the work that they had to offer and the work that I did. And then at one level of generalism, or if I may call it, That's not enough. The next level of generalism is therefore even wider, right? And that's where I think when I moved health to healthcare, I quickly realized that healthcare was roughly 20, 25 years behind banking in terms of its organizational capability, in terms of its organizational thought process, in terms of its talent capability, right? Capability to grow. And that kind of then allows you to, or definitely makes you put into action all the things that you've learned, right, in a sales organization. And because that's the base you need to fix first, right? The esoteric ideas or some innovation can come a little later. So you've got to start from organization building right from ground zero, or process building. Not to say that everything is zero, but in your mind it is zero, right? Because you are used to a structured life in a professional organization. And I moved from a structured, professional, board driven organization to a promoter driven organization in healthcare first, right? Which had an investment from a private equity. And that is a whole new ball game. So I don't believe that either or is the truth. I think each one of us has to figure out our own truths, but I definitely believe that it's important to have range. It's important to build a range of skills across various industries, because that is necessary for your own future growth, right? It makes you more appealing to other industries who are maybe today staid, maybe set in their ways, but are maybe stagnant, may not be growing, or are being disrupted quite badly by new age kids on the block, new age companies. So unless you have a mindset which allows you to become from a specialist back to a generalist and allows you to move back to a specialist role for a particular period of time, you will find it very difficult to become as successful as you want to be, right? You may find it difficult and you may find it frustrating, uh, to do the things you believe are necessary for this organization's growth. So I think it's I think it's important both sides, right? And I think
Yeah, you're right. So is it so I think in today's times, if we just look at it, it is the skills which are important. So when you're talking about it's a managerial skill, or it is the organizational, putting the organization together skill, which is more important, because you can then apply that skill everywhere. But the product per se, I think, is something that one is that of course you can have people who know understand the product better. That's one. And the second is, I think it can be learned today, whereas skills is something that you develop yourself. And I think as a leader, you might be requiring more or less, the data analytics piece, and maybe bringing together people on the table. I think those are the skills which one has, which are general skills which can be applied to any industry. I think
that's
broadly
true.
that's
You're,
what.
you're absolutely true. What you're saying is absolutely true. I think the skills of, taking people along, the skills of
Mhm.
understanding them as separate individuals, not as one broad brush. It's easy to say, it's easier said than done, but because you have so many biases as
Yeah.
you grow higher and higher. Uh, and also the fact that you have to be physically on the ground to understand what's happening, right? You can't, the higher you go, the more important it is that the more frequent your visits to the field must be, in my
Now
opinion,
that's very
right?
interesting, because
So
yeah, I love this. In fact, I like this piece of service operations. Where the general impression, and I think also reality, having seen and spoken to so many people, that as the organization grows larger, when you're in the very small setup, everyone knows everyone. We also know the customer very well. But as the organization grows, the distance between leadership and the customer actually increases. So my next question to you, logically, and that's also what I had noted, was that how much of technology, or what is the role of technology, okay, in getting this kind of information, when you're in larger structures or growing structures? How does it help? Because one is you keep getting some information digitally, and one is what you're saying, on the ground piece. So how does this work?
So, if I may rephrase your question, you're asking how does leadership understand what's happening on the ground with respect not just to operations but to customers' feedback as well? So, I think here it's very, very important that the leader sets expectations with his team by his thought and his word and his deeds, right? All of them have to be in sync and they have to be regular, right? So you can't say something at the beginning of the year in the AOP and then remember it 6 months later, because it's not going to happen, right? People need reminders. We all need reminders. We're all humans, right? At the end of the day, and we're all trying to do multiple things. So this whole concept of multitasking has been taken to its death. I think we need to stop that and say we have to become multi-skilled, not multitasking, because multitasking, I think now it works to a certain extent, but beyond that, you start getting marginal returns. So you have to find out how, when is the place to stop, and how do you make people multi-skilled so that they can use their skills at different points in time. Doing everything together at the same time, barring 2 or 3 activities, really doesn't result in any great outcome, right? And over the years we've been spoken about multitasking and so on and so forth. So one is you have to communicate what you want. Second is you have to go on the field and show and tell, right? I mean, if you remember the earlier days in sales, people used to say you got to do joint calls. What does joint call do? Yeah, it shows you and it tells you. Your boss shows you how it is done, and the situation informs you what needs to be done, right? It is same for any industry or any operations or any kind of skill or work that you want your people to imbibe. So you have to go there and show and tell, right? If you want certain things cleaned, right? You are a stickler for cleanliness, right? In healthcare, I mean, it's a given.
Yeah, yeah,
That
I agree.
wasn't, yeah, like nobody used to really bother about that in the bank, right? I mean, and their banks were generally clean, right? I mean, but the sense of cleanliness, the level of cleanliness and the attention to the detail of cleanliness is 10x, 20x when you come to healthcare, right? So my own evolution of what is cleanliness has gone up 10x. Why? Because now I'm seeing it as the consumer sees it, right? So how do you explain that to your team members who have not, you know, who may not be living in such a pristine environment in their own homes? How do you get that across?
So
You
can
may
you
keep
just
saying the
can you just give an example or be a little specific about how you would do it? It's very interesting because see, one is to say, but how would you actually just if you can think
it's
of
a
some example,
yeah,
yeah,
no, I have something to say, but I'm not too sure whether
whether
it
you
is,
should
whether I
say.
should say it or not. But so let me say it, right, because I believe in it, right.
Okay.
So I've been talking about cleanliness, and I go to clinics and I check every nook and corner, and I've been doing that since the time I joined about 8, 9 years back in healthcare, and I still do it today. And every time I go there, my first trip is to the lavatory, to the washroom,
Yeah, yeah.
right,
I
to
think
see
that's
what's
like
is it good,
yeah, yeah, that's
right,
the most
right, and
important.
and and then and then I take a round of each and every clinic. I go. So we've got beds, right, which have bed mattresses. So I lift up the mattresses and I put my hand below it and see if it's clean, see the bed sheets, all of that, right. And when you find dust and stuff, you talk to your team and say, "Hey, this is not right. See, I found dust. Why don't you clean it?" Right? And you do this for 2, 3 times, right, in your
Yeah,
visits if you have gone right to the same clinic. Now, a lot of people, take it up. A lot of people don't take it up. A lot of people have different views. A lot of people don't see the dirt only, right, or come up with various reasons. And the dirt may be very minuscule, right? The customer may not even see it,
yeah,
but
yeah.
that's an assumption people make. But if the customer wants to see it, he can see anything he wants, and he
Hmm.
does see. Is what I've realized. He doesn't talk about it.
Hmm.
If he likes your brand, he doesn't talk much about it, right? But he does not like it. So the fourth time when I really went down into the same clinic, right, and I found the stuff was not the way it was supposed to be.
Hmm.
I took a broom and I started sweeping. And it came as a shock to my team. And I said, it doesn't matter. This is my clinic. I will clean. So I cleaned, and they got embarrassed and all that jazz. But I said, okay, if you're feeling embarrassed, okay, you pick up stuff. Let's clean together.
Mm.
And I think more than anything, I felt so bad that I had to, personally, right? I think that's important for leaders to feel.
Yeah.
It's fine to talk, "Arey, theek hai, it's okay, it's fine, these guys are working so hard." But I don't think it's fine, right? So I picked it up, and with that, the team picked it up, and then we spent a couple of hours cleaning the clinic, right? And I think that had some impact on the people. I would like to believe that.
Yeah, yeah, the
And
word spreads
right,
around, right? It's not just one location. It's like, yeah, I mean, people
right.
talk to
And
each
I
other.
and I yeah, and I found that, after that, I think a lot of change happened. Obviously, we have a long way to go, but I think that's one part, right? And you make an example. But the other part is also to realize that these people are nurses, people who make 15, 20, 30,000. They don't live in houses where they have a maid coming and cleaning. They may not even be living in where they have washroom facilities private. So for them, the concept is not natural. You have to also realize that and then put that into your training, right? Through showing and telling, right? And it starts with grooming. So yeah, because that person may be staying in a 200 square feet house, and that person comes to work every day. She's a nurse. She's taking care of everybody, of the patient, right? Or he's an X-ray technician. What do you do? So it's not easy for leaders. So most of them take the gentle way out and say, "Oh, I understand," but they don't take, apart from the gentle way, they don't also take the way of teaching, which to my mind is very challenging. The middle managers are the ones who take the brunt of either the juniors or the seniors, right? So it's very important to train them first rather than the staff, right? To kind of tell them ki while you are gentle and kind, you also are here because the customer exists, right? If the customer didn't exist, you and I wouldn't exist. So it is important to do this. So some of these things I think is important for leaders, and not just senior leaders. I would say any leader who's handling a few team members. I think hygiene, operations, any type of operational hygiene, right, is necessary and important, to get to the next level.
Yeah, yeah. So now, just coming to what you're saying, see, one is that you have a lot of physical presence. In fact, recently, when what caught my attention was you opened a clinic at Andaman and Nicobar Islands, right? Port Blair. So now the point, now, especially when you are spread across geography, yeah, there is a lot of localized environment that exists. So every place has its own culture, its own set of people, and different ways of doing things. So, how do you ensure, first of all, is it necessary in your kind of setup and industry to have consistency in service? In the sense that, if I go to a clinic in X place, should I get the same experience as I go to Y? Or is it that people generally don't, they stick to a geography?
So in healthcare, it's largely consumers stick to a geography because either they're working or they're staying in a particular city. But consistency is definitely important when you're running a brand with hundreds of clinics, right, across the country, across many cities. So for us, I think one is a protocol driven approach, which is not just service protocols, right? How do you greet the customer? What billing systems do you use? What data do you capture? But also uh, the medical protocols, which are the core of why any healthcare organization or an organization like Apollo would exist, right? For that matter. So you have to be aware of both, right? And you have to teach people both. So medicine and healthcare is largely a professional organization where you have doctors and various professionals who have studied for many years and who understand what needs to be done to either cure something or prevent something or manage a disease, right? And they are a set of people who are very different. They're like chalk and cheese, right? When I compare them to, let's say, operations managers, right, who will then run the clinic for you, right? So there's a lot of, a lot of employees, non-medical professionals in healthcare are attuned towards customer service already, right? They understand that a customer walking in is not coming because he likes coming to a clinic, right? He doesn't like it. He has to come because he has no choice. He's in pain, right? So to treat each one of them, keep their voices low, make eye contact, talk to them, guide them physically, right? There's this token system which is so prevalent in everywhere else, is unfortunately not so widely prevalent in healthcare, but it should be, right? So the employee team members are so much more moldable, but the doctor fraternity has their own views. So their job is to cure people, and sometimes they spend 2 minutes with a customer, sometimes they spend 10, sometimes they talk lots, and they make the customer feel so like a family member. Sometimes they're very brusque, they don't talk much. Now, these are inconsistencies in service delivery at the medical doctor level, right? Which is a big challenge, because I'm not too sure, and I don't really think that they can be standardized completely, like you would do with your employees.
Banking or
But
even banking and all. There is more standard.
correct.
There's more standardization around it.
But
Yeah.
but I believe, but what I'm seeing, and I'm encouraged by what I see, is that doctors are now, over the last 5-7 years, are accepting consumer feedback if it is given to them in a structured manner. So at our organization, 5 years back, 7 years back, we had NPS, right, for consumer feedback for the clinic as a whole. 5 years back, we started NPS feedback for doctors. Individual doctors get NPS feedback. And then me and my team used to conduct every quarter a meeting with all the doctors and talk about what consumers are saying about our service, our brand, which includes doctors' behavior as well. And it took us over 3-4 years to change the doctors' perceptions. We also helped and they also understood, right? That customers don't like to be kept waiting for more than 10 minutes from their appointed time. Customers like to spend 7, 8, 10 minutes with the doctor. Customers like to speak and not be made
Only
to
listen.
remain silent.
Yeah.
And at the initial phase, doctors rejected this, saying, no, no, I know what's best for the customer. But, and the word they used to use is patient, right? So when I moved to the industry, it's patient, patient, patient. And I got tired. I said, he's not a patient here, he's a customer. And that I have seen that change. Their expectations from healthcare are now similar to what they would expect from any new, any industry, service industry, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a bank, whether it's Swiggy. They expect that kind, because their expectations have been, have risen because they're getting it from other industries, and they'd like the same in healthcare. And you and I can't say, and you and I and the doctor cannot say, no, it's okay, we'll do what we want to do. We have to change with the times, and we have to actually be one step ahead. And that's where, we've been able to kind of, to a large extent, mold the doctors' views, get them to be more accepting of change, and they have changed. Quite a few of them have changed.
Yeah, yeah. Because as consumers also they are changing. See, this is like, I mean, this has really happened very fast. The customers have changed, the service providers have changed, and we, as not just as professionals, but even as consumers, we have changed. So uh, the lines between industries have blurred so much that your Amazon becomes the model and Uber becomes a model, and anything can become a model. If I get a blood tested in the morning, so I expect first of all someone to come home because I don't want to go. If somebody comes home, takes my blood sample, then by 5:30 I start looking at my phone for the report. And if I don't get it, then I call, kya hua, the report hasn't come. And then I want the report in a particular way, because we're so used to now seeing data in, you want to actually get that kind of experience. And what you're saying is also right. The person who comes to collect the blood sample is not as trained as somebody who's that senior. They're nice people, but yeah, we expect that kind of interaction with them. So yeah, customer experience has really changed a lot. As leadership of the healthcare industry that you are a part of, share to the extent that you can, what are the top 3 or 4 metrics that you track from that customer service?
So, we track quite a few actually. Right, in healthcare, earlier used to not track so many, but once you've been inducted in the bank, right,
Banking,
or in
COVID.
telecom, right, and
Yeah.
so you kind of try and put as many as possible. But what I've realized here in healthcare is you've got to put it in paces, right? Because healthcare is not a sales organization, right? Unlike all other organizations, healthcare is a healthcare service delivery organization. You cannot treat it like a sales organization, and you can't make it like one. So you have to be very conscious of behaviors which you may have found effective in your previous organizations. They will not work here, so you have to adapt. So there are a few metrics that we do. One is the consumer-facing metric I mentioned is we do NPS on a daily basis, and we do it through multiple channels. Now, through WhatsApp, through automated phone calls, right? And then we take not just for the clinic, but we also take it for our doctors. So we do doctor-wise NPS scores. We also keep a track of what's happening on Google. So our Google ratings are an internal important metric that all of us track because that is also what consumers are saying on the public platform, right? And that's visible to everybody. So, and it's important to manage that reputation and that part as well. Internally, we have a bunch of metrics on how the clinic should look and feel, around cleanliness, around hygiene, around report TATs, right? Around health check TATs. So when you come in for a health check, we want you to do X, Y, and Z as quickly as possible. We're also trying to figure out ways to do health checks partly at your house and then partly at the clinic, because a typical health check takes around 3 hours or so on a regular day, and maybe a little bit more. And we're trying to innovate and trying to find out if I could do part of the health check at home and just call you to the clinic for half an hour for your X-ray and USG, right? X-ray and USG ultrasound, and the rest can happen. Blood can be collected by a phlebotomist at your home. You could do a video call, consult with a doctor. And all of that stuff happens, and you get your reports online, and then you do the consult. So we also have a lot of internal metrics in terms of how much time does it take for the reports to be uploaded. So not all reports are automated. Some are yet to be printed, manual and stuff. So we have stats around that as well. How fast can the report go to corporate clients? So we've kind of built a portal which allows the corporate HR to look at how many people walked into any of our Apollo clinics today for a health check, right? So it's like a show. Did people show up or not, right? How many? And then all the reports are there. So, he can mix and match and do many things that he would like to do. So those are some of the things we kind of track. On the medical front, obviously at our labs, we track the pre-analytical errors, which means before the sample goes into the lab, into the machine, we make sure that the sample is 100% in its right form, right? Because if it's damaged or polluted, then the results can be different. So at our backend labs, we have a whole bunch of metrics that we do. Then we also have a complaint management system. So the complaints all come to me. And that's one thing that I realized which is very different in healthcare versus other industries, at least during my previous stints, is I learned to handle or to read all those complaints myself, right? And be on top of them for the first 3-4 years till I got somebody else to be on top of them. Because A, it gives you real-time feedback of what customers don't like about your service. B, it also, when you act on it or you get your team members to act on it, they start building neurons in their brain to say that, hey, this is not right, this is the way I should do it, right? And try and prevent the same thing happening again. And I think C, very important, a cultures of saying that the customer is the most important person, right? I think that even though it's healthcare, right, we are yet to reach that stage, right? So if I were to say that from a banking in terms of customer service, we were at, let's say, 10x, right? We gave 10x worth of service. In healthcare, straight away 30x. But even that 30x is not enough from what the customer wants. So you have to keep evolving and getting to that level that the consumer wants, the patient wants, or the consumer wants. And what does he want essentially from healthcare? He wants somebody to be nice to him. He wants somebody to talk to him and say, this is what I need to do, this is where you need to do. He needs hand holding, physical hand holding. At least the customers who come to the clinic, right? He needs to be told. And the biggest challenge in healthcare is people, we don't communicate enough with the consumer, right? And I think that's our next level of growth, is how do we communicate more and more, both digitally, but even more important, physically, because they're coming in, right? They've made the effort to come in. Or even if they've called a phlebotomist at home, how does he communicate, right? Because people, when they have illnesses, they want information till that illness is either resolved or solved, right? So they need that doctor access. They want to WhatsApp, ask him questions on WhatsApp 3-4 times after they've left the clinic, right? They would really love it if he was available 24/7,
Yeah,
which
actually,
is what.
I'm loving what you're saying because, uh, you know, uh, having worked with a few of the seniors, who actually read complaints, I think what you said was just bang on, and that's so important because you're hearing straight from the customer to you. It's not data, it is not scores, it is
Correct.
not statistics, it's not numbers, it is what a person is feeling, and in this whole
Absolutely.
digital world, somewhere we lose out on emotions. It's, it comes by a number. Okay, yes, tick, this is your problem, then this is what, I will solve for you, I'll try and solve for you. But when a person is taking the trouble to write, I'm sure he puts in a lot of his emotions into it. And that's like, I think, a very very good practice, in my is what I really believe in, that the way to touch or to get the real information is the direct interaction and reading the complaints
True.
fully. I think
Correct.
that's done
And
wonders, I'm
asking
sure.
the right questions, right? Trying not to sound too cynical about it, but telling your managers that this gentleman has a point. He's making a valid point. And even if the valid point is not is you may complain about it being a Saturday and there'll be 500 people in the clinic. At the end of the day, he doesn't care. He's paid you. He's paid for a service, a certain level of service. He expects it. So you figure out a way to solve for it,
And the other
right?
leg of this is also, see, one is getting the complaint and reading it. The second is asking the right questions, or rather, asking questions at all to the people who do the work. Because, there's this other tendency of forwarding it and then someone looks at it and someone solves it, and, the leader really not getting information on what exactly went wrong. So, finding the, I also think that who you ask the question to is also very important, because it's not the person who has done the mistake, because they, or maybe even, I don't know how it works on your side, but even on the business side, someone comes and explains that, okay, look, this is what happened, but getting to the person who will give you the real information.
Yes, and I think after doing the investigation, I think actually just before that, I think if I reply to the customer and say, "Hey, we're really sorry, we're looking into it," and it goes from my desk or my head of service desk immediately, it has a different impact. The person believes that you are serious about his complaint, right? It may, and he may give you 24 hours or 48 hours, right? So it is. Yeah, and see, we run a very distributed network across 55 cities. We also run these clinics are managed by our franchisee business partners as well, right? And in healthcare, uh, you know, the we are one of, I think maybe one or two, providers who do franchising, apart from obviously the diagnostic players. But all our franchisee partners are hardcore businessmen who have run successful businesses, which involves people and customers, right? So for them also, we track their NPS and we educate them and say, because it's part of our protocol, and we say, hey, this is not your two-wheeler sales business. This is not your traditional trading business. This is a people business, and your brand will be made or broken in 1 year, not beyond that, right? It is not, there are enough and more options for people in India, at least in the top 25 cities. uh, Healthcare, unfortunately, is 85% unorganized, and it's at private healthcare is unorganized, but it's still working, right? Right, and public healthcare is becoming better by the
And
day.
it's also very competitive because I mean, see, I'm quite a stickler, so I like to go to a particular, if I the quarterly blood test that sometimes you try some health experiment and then you want to check if it's working or not, so you keep going to the same provider. But what I've seen recently is that a message pops up from somewhere, oh, in 799 you can do all this stuff, and then you say, okay, well, I might as well try because what's the harm? At least in diagnostics, if you're running at something at 80, you think if it's 82 or 78, it's fine. I mean, whether X is giving it or Y is giving it. So there's a lot of competition also. I mean, I think it's like really
That's
fierce
true.
competition.
That's true, and it's good for the for the consumer, for the customer, right? As
Yeah,
it is, out of pocket expenses in India
yeah,
uh, are reasonably high.
yeah.
There's no OPD insurance. We're hoping someday it'll come,
Hmm.
like it's there in the West, right? So healthcare expenditure can wreck people's
Oh,
finances,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
It's not
yes.
an easy thing, and COVID has unfortunately, shown us that.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
So, Anand, I'm just, what I'm understanding from your conversation is that you have very successfully deployed all your learnings from telecom and banking into, the work that you're doing now. It's really coming out in when you're speaking, because I can imagine, yeah, this is what is to happen in banking, and you can apply, apply quite a
But
bit of
there are
it.
but there are a few things I learned from healthcare which I never knew.
Yes, that you must have done.
One is customer service is it is in a healthcare. Unless you feel it here, it's not going to, you'll not really realize. Unless
Hmm.
you feel that patient's pain, you have to feel it, and that's what I felt when I first came in, and I used to wonder, why does my senior is concerned when I first came into healthcare. Why is he concerned about every complaint that comes to his desk? And in the total, we used to get 50 complaints in a month versus doing 50,000 transactions or 1 lakh transactions. And we've been trained, right, analytically to say it's 0.001. It's okay.
It's
You're
okay.
still doing a
Yeah.
fantastic job. But I think, people in healthcare who are really, truly there to serve customers, right? Uh,
Hmm.
I could, to some extent, uh, imbibe some of that pain and therefore understand
Okay. Okay.
some of that. I can't say I have all of it, but unless you imbibe that pain, you will not have this view, right? You'll
Yeah.
still run your ops by numbers then, and
Correct.
that, to my mind, is a big red flag in healthcare.
No, no, you're
You
right. But
have to
that's
look at it every
no,
customer, and
even in sorry to cut you, even in I think in any industry, see, we give ourselves comfort that we work out percentages and things like that. In any industry, it's very important to also track volume, the absolute number, because that absolute number is the number of people who got affected. You might run a very large you might run a large company, but eventually it is the absolute number of complaints that you got. And I think that's, you're right, absolutely right, that's really very
the
important.
the second thing I learned was that, the people who work in the health industry are really at a different level in terms of empathy. That I think is very important, and that also allowed me to become a better manager, better leader of people, right? Of myself first, obviously myself, and then of the team, because that level of empathy, in other organizations you'll find it. I'm not saying you won't, but you won't find it so widespread. So empathy by nurses, by staff, they work beyond their time, do extra stuff, take the frustrations of the customer on their head. Right? See, it's one thing to lose money, right? Money is replaceable. For example, in the bank, you make a mistake, you transfer funds. But it's a whole different ball game if you're pricked twice while taking blood. You suddenly lose your composure, as much composed as you are as a regular human being elsewhere. So they have to take that, and yet they have to say, okay, we're sorry, it's a mistake. They say, how can you make a mistake? And obviously doctors, nurses, everybody is expected not to make a mistake, right? And that kind of puts a huge amount. So empathy. And third is this willingness to keep your personal challenges secondary to your work, and I've seen that in COVID. I mean, people have walked and fought police on the at the barricades to reach their clinics, because our view was that even if there is a lockdown, the clinics will remain open. Because if somebody needs help, where is he going to go? And to get our people from their homes and to make them come. Right? People say they're frontline employees, yeah, they should do, it's their job. I agree, it's their job. But they also have this fear, right? What will happen to me, the first wave? What will happen to me? Who's going to take care of me? I live in a room with 4 people. I have only 2 rooms in my house. If I have something, how do I get quarantined? What do I do? And that's where I think organizations really stepped in and helped everyone. I think all organizations across the globe.
Very commendable job. Actually, in fact, I think whoever worked to help anyone, I think it's beyond our normal, thinking. People have, I think, just a regular transaction or a regular work that people did during COVID times was, amplified multiple times in terms of effort. It really
And I'll
requires.
tell you, there's one more thing that the healthcare industry, that we at Apollo did. When the first wave came, there were no customers coming in.
Huh.
And you know that once you've gone to a hospital or a clinic and you come back, that's it. There's no relation till the next time you go to the hospital or the
Yeah,
clinic,
in
right?
fact, that was one
There's
thing
no
that was
relation.
coming. Yes, there's no relation.
So what we did, and I had been wanting to do this since the time I joined, I said, why is there no relationship beyond the transaction that has happened? So COVID gave us this opportunity, and I was trying to do it before COVID, but faced a lot of resistance. But during COVID, people had no work to do in the clinics. So we asked all of them, we said, pick up a list of your customers, call them up and ask them, do you need help? We're not a sales organization. The question is very simple. Ask them, do you need help?
Yeah.
What can we do to help you? And I am telling you, we spent that entire year, the first year, every day people from clinics were calling customers, and customers loved it. Because nobody else in the industry was doing this. They felt so good saying, oh, thank you, you called, can you do this for me? And then those queries started coming, then those requests started coming. Right?
That's when you started online
And
consultation.
yes, I mean, that happened after a few months. But the idea was to tell them, we're here for you. You've come to my clinic once. We know who you are. We know there is a pandemic, and we're trying to call and find out, is there something you want? And we delivered. We sent nurses home. We sent doctors home. We told them the clinics are open so they could come. And that, I think, was, in my mind, something that really engendered these customers back to the Apollo brand, or
That
to us.
loyalty
Right,
concept.
right.
Yeah.
Because otherwise there was no
Yeah.
space in the hospitals. People were being turned away for lack of beds. So I think this relationship is something in healthcare that I think needs to be nurtured both digitally and physically. And obviously now the digital Options have also come in where you're connected via an app if you download the
Yeah.
24 Apollo 247 app. But I think the physical connection is also important. So you have a bunch of customers who like digital connections, and then you have a bunch of customers who say, "Yeah, I'd like to go talk to this person in the clinic or this doctor in the clinic." Right. So
Yeah.
I think we've got to do both.
Yeah, yeah, right. So, Anand, I think in all that you've told me, you have covered, like, most of the questions that I had in my mind and much more than, what I was thinking of. And it's really very interesting. I was, wanting to talk to you all the time, precisely for this reason, that how do we connect industries? What is it that we can pick up from one and put to the other? And what are the learnings of one? Because I remember, like, I'm talking about, say, 2020, 2 years ago, or maybe even 25 years ago, when banking had, when this new private sector banks had come, that's 94, 95, and also we used to look up to the hotel industry, because we thought that they really gave very good service. So what do they do? We used to look up to the airline industry, to see what we can learn from them and how do they manage it, how does this consistency come. And of course, now the role models have changed. All this digitization, internet, technology, I mean, it's changing, and it's changing very fast. So there's a lot of learning from industries. But I think at the end of the day, what you're saying is that the fundamentals of human relations, and understanding the customer, remain the same irrespective of what we use to convey, or what we use to get information from them.
Yeah, the fundamentals do remain the same, but I believe one more fundamental that is starting to shape up is that consumers are becoming more self-directed and wanting less human interaction.
Yeah.
Not for the sake of not wanting human interaction, but the sake of convenience, speed, and ease
Yeah.
of getting things done. So you have a generation of people, of consumers who are saying, if you can get it to me digitally, I'm more than happy here, right? You service me digitally for things that can be serviced digitally. I'm with you for life.
Mm.
And it's also nice to know that you also have a physical outlet,
Yeah.
right? So there are certain things that I can't deliver digitally, but I can deliver physically, and therefore the fundamental of distribution network still remains the same.
Yes.
If you don't have enough clinics across enough markets, you can only deliver so much, right?
Yeah.
You can only deliver the physical aspect so much. Digital, you can deliver a lot of things across the country,
I don't know if you
right?
recollect, there was a time when people used to talk about branchless banking. So everyone,
Yeah,
there was this whole idea that, you don't need branches at all, but you still need branches.
correct.
It's been so many years. You may reduce the number, you may increase the number. We still like to go to restaurants, though we can get food home.
Exactly. So consume.
Yeah.
So you have to keep kind of understanding consumer behavior change every couple of years, uh,
Yeah.
and the healthcare customer, is not so easy to read, right? Because you get to see him once, maybe in a year, at least at the clinic level,
And
right?
also when
Because
the situation is not very good. See, normally there are very few people who do preventive healthcare. Most of the people come to you when, yeah, something has
when they have
gone.
a problem, right,
Yeah.
right. So, but I think I'm seeing certain amount of change where people are saying, hey, okay, let me do a health check once a year at least, right? So that's level one of preventive healthcare, which is fine, which is something that's changed over the last 7 8 years, and largely because corporates kept on making sure the employees remained healthy through the health checks program. And I think it's also now moving into the retail space. Like you were mentioning, 799 can also be a health check,
Yeah.
a different kind of a health check, but nonetheless, in 1,000 rupees, you could do a whole
Basic.
bunch of tests, which can tell you a lot of things. So I think one has to keep the consumer at the center, and try and understand him as much as you can and deliver as much as he wants.
Thank you so much, Anand. It's been a really, really learning conversation from you, and I'm sure the listeners will benefit. And we'll connect again when we need some more, some more service operations related, deeper information from you.
Sure, Satyendra, I wish you all
Thank
the very
you.
best. Thank you so much for having me on your
Thank
show.
you. My
It was
pleasure. And I
wonderful
will
connecting with all of you.
Same here, same here.